The headquarters of the U.S. Agency for International Development, or USAID, was closed to personnel on Monday, sending shockwaves around the world.
On a quiet Saturday morning, several individuals from the newly formed Department of Government Efficiency arrived at the USAID headquarters in Washington, D.C. Their appearance wasn't random. Just days earlier, President Donald Trump had returned to office, beginning his term as the 47th President of the United States. The country was still adjusting to this political shift when unexpected developments began unfolding. The group demanded immediate access to the building, sparking confusion and concern among staff members and observers. Many didn't know what was happening until the full story emerged. Shortly after Trump's inauguration, his administration announced a series of major changes, ranging from stricter immigration controls to executive orders focused on national energy policy. But it was his decision to suspend the United States Agency for International Development, commonly known as USAID, that created the biggest shock. In a dramatic move, Trump ordered the agency's operations to be halted for 90 days, citing the need for a full investigation into its financial practices. More strikingly, key members of the agency were arrested under suspicion of misconduct, sending shockwaves through both Washington and the international community. Many were left wondering why such a drastic step was taken against a government agency that, for decades, had been viewed as the face of American humanitarian aid. USAID had built its reputation on delivering assistance to struggling countries around the world, supporting everything from disaster relief to education and healthcare initiatives. For most of the public, the agency stood for goodwill and development. So why would the government shut it down so abruptly? The answer, according to the Trump administration, lay in what they called a long-standing pattern of financial waste, mismanagement, and a lack of accountability. Trump claimed that billions of taxpayer dollars were being sent overseas with little oversight, and that much of the money was either misused or vanished altogether. During one of his early cabinet meetings, he described the foreign aid system as broken and inefficient, pointing directly at USAID as a primary example of what he saw as government waste. But the real turning point came when Elon Musk, now heading the Department of Government Efficiency, became involved. Musk, a figure typically associated with tech innovation and private industry, was an unconventional choice to oversee a federal government department. However, Trump's administration had created this new agency to root out inefficiencies across all branches of the federal government. Musk took the task seriously and began looking closely at USAID's financial records and operational reports. In public statements, Musk claimed the agency had evolved into something far removed from its original mission. He alleged that many of its programs had become outdated and redundant, failing to deliver measurable impact despite receiving large budgets year after year. According to Musk, USAID lacked basic technological systems to monitor where funds went once they left U.S. hands. He also claimed that internal resistance to transparency had allowed corruption to go unchecked for years. These claims weren't made in isolation. Investigative journalists and federal audits had previously raised questions about USAID's financial practices. Reports from the Office of the Inspector General had documented challenges with tracking funds and ensuring they reached intended recipients. In some cases, money earmarked for infrastructure development, such as hospitals or clean water systems, was found to have been spent inefficiently or lost due to corruption in partner countries. The watchdog reports highlighted not only poor oversight, but also repeated failures to enforce accountability in foreign contracts and partnerships. As news of the arrest spread, legal experts began weighing in. Some supported the administration's actions, arguing that the arrests were a necessary step in addressing corruption. Others, however, raised concerns about due process and transparency. A number of the detained USAID officials had not yet been formally charged with any crimes, sparking debate about whether the moves were politically motivated. Not long after the shutdown was announced, a federal judge stepped in. Responding to legal challenges brought forward by former USAID officials and advocacy groups, the judge issued a preliminary injunction against the administration's order. The ruling stated that the executive action likely violated constitutional norms, especially concerning how federal agencies are managed and dismantled. The judge also ordered that suspended employees be given access to their communications and work systems pending further review of the case. This development added a legal layer to an already complicated political story. At the same time, the international community reacted with confusion and concern. Many developing countries had relied heavily on USAID funding for crucial health, education, and infrastructure projects. The sudden freeze of operations meant that several ongoing programs were halted midstream, leaving local communities in uncertainty. Humanitarian groups warned that without USAID's logistical support, crisis zones, such as areas recovering from natural disasters or conflict, could face even greater instability. Behind the scenes, conversations in Washington turned to the broader implications of the decision. Critics questioned whether the government's approach to foreign aid would shift entirely. Would other agencies be next? Would foreign aid be scaled back permanently? And was this part of a larger plan to redefine America's role in global development? Trump and Musk maintained that their goal was not to abandon foreign aid altogether, but to reform it. They insisted that U.S. taxpayers deserved to know exactly where their money was going and that foreign assistance should be delivered more effectively, with measurable results and strict oversight. According to internal memos leaked to the press, Musk's team proposed using technologies such as blockchain and biometrics to track aid delivery in real time and prevent misuse. They argued that these systems could bring a level of transparency that had long been missing from foreign aid efforts. Still, the rollout of these plans was anything but smooth. The Department of Government Efficiency was new and not yet fully operational. Critics said it lacked the infrastructure and personnel to manage a review of such scale. Others argued that disbanding or freezing USAID without a clear alternative in place risked doing more harm than good. In Congress, lawmakers were divided. Some supported Trump's hard stance, while others introduced legislation aimed at protecting the agency from being dismantled without congressional approval. In the media, reactions were mixed. Some outlets framed the story as a long overdue reckoning for an agency that had escaped proper scrutiny for too long. Others called the move short-sighted and potentially dangerous, warning that it could undermine America's global standing. Over the next few weeks, opinion pieces, TV segments, and panel discussions debated the decision from all sides. Was this a bold step towards reform, or a politically motivated act with far-reaching consequences? Concerns around USAID's operations are not new. For years, watchdog organizations and investigative journalists have pointed out a troubling lack of transparency in how the agency allocates and monitors funds. While the idea of helping developing countries is widely supported in principle, critics argue that the way this help is delivered is deeply flawed. Billions of dollars have been spent through USAID programs, but the results on the ground have often fallen short. Infrastructure projects have been left unfinished, schools and clinics have been built only to sit empty, and large sums of money have disappeared into administrative costs or into the hands of third-party contractors. One of the most widely cited examples of these shortcomings can be seen in the aftermath of the 2010 earthquake in Haiti. The United States pledged billions of dollars in aid to help the country recover from the disaster. Much of that funding was channeled through USAID and other international organizations. Yet years later, many Haitians still live without stable housing or basic services. Reports revealed that only a small fraction of the promised aid actually reached Haitian institutions. Most of the money went to American contractors or large international NGOs with limited oversight or local accountability. In many cases, projects were announced with great fanfare, but delivered very little in terms of long-term benefits. The aid was meant to rebuild the country, but to many, it seemed more like an opportunity for foreign companies to profit. This pattern was not limited to Haiti. In Afghanistan, USAID was heavily involved in reconstruction and development efforts following the US-led military intervention. Billions of dollars were spent on projects designed to stabilize the country and improve everyday life for ordinary Afghans. However, numerous audits and investigations later revealed serious problems. In some instances, aid money was used to fund agricultural programs aimed at discouraging poppy cultivation. But the execution of these programs was poor, and in several cases, the funding actually ended up supporting poppy farmers, undermining the very goals of the campaign. Worse still, some of that money indirectly helped the Taliban, raising serious concerns about the unintended consequences of foreign aid. These failures have fueled calls for greater accountability within USAID. One of the major criticisms is that the agency relies too heavily on large international contractors and bypasses local organizations. This top-down approach often results in aid being out of touch with the actual needs of the communities it's meant to help. Instead of working directly with local stakeholders, USAID tends to operate through complex bureaucratic systems that slow down delivery and increase costs. Critics argue that if more funding went to grassroots groups and local NGOs, aid would be more effective, more relevant, and more transparent. Inside the agency, there have also been issues with reporting and oversight. Delays in investigating claims of fraud, abuse, and exploitation have undermined public confidence in the agency's integrity. In several cases, reports of misconduct were not passed along quickly enough to trigger proper investigations. As a result, opportunities to gather evidence and take action were lost. These breakdowns in communication have made it difficult to determine whether aid money was being used appropriately or falling into the wrong hands. In response to these long-standing issues, the Trump administration took a hard stance. After returning to office, President Trump and his newly established Department of Government Efficiency began a full-scale review of USAID. The department, led by Elon Musk, was tasked with identifying and eliminating waste across the federal government. USAID quickly became a central focus of this effort. According to Musk, the agency had grown bloated and ineffective. He argued that much of the aid being sent overseas was either being misused or having little measurable impact. As part of this reform effort, several USAID officials were placed under investigation, and the agency's operations were temporarily suspended. This decision was highly controversial. Supporters of the move said it was a necessary step in cleaning up a dysfunctional system. They pointed to years of reports and audits that showed inefficiency and waste. Critics, however, warned that cutting off aid programs without proper planning could harm vulnerable populations and damage America's reputation abroad. They also raised concerns about the political motives behind the shutdown, arguing that it might be less about reform and more about reshaping America's global role. The move had immediate consequences. Ongoing aid projects in countries like Vietnam, South Sudan, and Nigeria were paused. Some of these programs included efforts to remove unexploded landmines, support survivors of war, and deliver medical supplies to areas affected by disease outbreaks. In many cases, local partners were left in limbo, unsure if or when funding would resume. The situation created uncertainty not only for aid recipients, but also for the thousands of people employed in development work around the world. Back in the United States, the controversy sparked debate among lawmakers. Some members of Congress supported the suspension, saying it was time to take a closer look at how foreign aid dollars were being spent. Others introduced measures to protect USAID from unilateral executive action, insisting that changes to the agency should be made through legislative channels and based on evidence, not ideology. There were also legal challenges. A federal judge issued an injunction against the government, arguing that the sudden shutdown of a major agency without proper legal authority could be unconstitutional. The ruling required that certain operations be resumed and that employees placed on leave be granted access to necessary systems. This legal intervention added another layer to the already complex situation, creating a standoff between the executive branch and the judiciary. Amid all of this, discussions about reforming the agency gained momentum. Some proposed that USAID should be merged with the State Department to increase oversight and align aid more closely with U.S. foreign policy goals. Others suggested introducing new technology, like blockchain, to better track where money goes and how it's used. Advocates for reform emphasized the need for clear goals, measurable outcomes, and stronger partnerships with local organizations. They argued that foreign aid, when done right, can be a powerful tool for peace, prosperity, and global stability. But when mismanaged, it can do more harm than good. USAID's mandate includes supporting democratic institutions, which often translates into funding electoral processes, civil society organizations, and media outlets. While these initiatives are designed to foster democratic values, they have sometimes been perceived as external interference in sovereign affairs. For instance, in Venezuela's 2024 presidential election, the Venezuelan government accused the United States and USAID of financing opposition activities and destabilization efforts. Officials claimed that USAID funded opposition primaries and was involved in an alleged cyber attack against Venezuela's electoral system. Conversely, the U.S. government expressed serious concerns over the election's integrity, suggesting the results did not reflect the Venezuelan people's will. Similarly, in Cuba, USAID's activities have been contentious. Between 2009 and 2012, the agency ran a multi-million-dollar program aimed at inciting rebellion in Cuba. This included establishing an anti-regime social network called Zunzuneo and deploying undercover operatives posing as tourists and aid workers to recruit potential dissidents. Such covert operations have raised ethical questions about the agency's role in influencing political outcomes under the guise of humanitarian aid. Beyond direct political involvement, USAID has played a significant role in shaping media landscapes globally. Supporting independent media has been part of USAID's democracy and governance assistance efforts since the 1980s, positioning the U.S. government as one of the largest public donors to independent media development globally. This support aims to promote press freedom and ensure the free flow of information. However, critics argue that such funding can lead to biases, with media outlets potentially aligning their narratives with U.S. interests to maintain financial support. The sudden hold on USAID foreign assistance funding by the U.S. Trump administration has had profound implications for independent media worldwide. An estimated $268 million in agreed grants for independent media and the free flow of information in more than 30 countries were frozen, throwing much of the nonprofit watchdog sector into crisis. This move not only jeopardized numerous reporters, contractors, and accountability projects, but also highlighted the vulnerability of media outlets relying heavily on foreign aid. The funding freeze has led to a decline in the number of independent media outlets globally, causing a surge in misinformation and playing into the hands of state propagandists. In Hungary, Prime Minister Viktor Orbán vowed to eliminate what he described as a global shadow army, serving the European Union and a liberal American empire. He promised a crackdown on foreign-funded media and organizations, accusing them of undermining Hungary's sovereignty. This stance reflects a broader skepticism toward foreign-funded entities, including those supported by USAID, perceived as instruments of external influence. The debate over USAID's role extends to its impact on domestic politics within recipient countries. In India, authorities investigated reports about U.S. government activities following President Donald Trump's allegation that USAID spent $21 million to influence Indian elections. This claim, shared on Elon Musk's platform X, was linked to sweeping cuts in foreign aid by President Trump. However, records and USAID staff denied such funds were ever distributed in India, confirming that the allocated $21 million was intended for political engagement in Bangladesh, not India. Despite this clarification, the allegations fueled political tensions in India, with parties accusing each other of benefiting from foreign funds. These controversies have led to calls for greater transparency and accountability in USAID's operations. Critics argue that while the agency's mission is to promote democracy and development, its methods sometimes blur the lines between assistance and interference. The perception of USAID as a tool for political maneuvering undermines its credibility and the legitimacy of the organizations it supports. In response to these challenges, discussions about restructuring USAID have emerged. The Trump administration proposed a significant restructuring of U.S. foreign aid, aiming to focus on areas better aligned with American geopolitical interests. This proposal suggests refocusing funding with a strategic approach, incorporating a new limited mandate body within the State Department to handle humanitarian assistance, disaster response, global health, and food security. Politically oriented programs would move to the State Department. Such restructuring aims to enhance national security and counter adversaries like China by ensuring that aid serves U.S. interests more directly. In early 2025, President Donald Trump issued Executive Order 14169, which initiated a near-total freeze on foreign aid. This decision was part of a broader effort to reassess and potentially restructure U.S. foreign assistance to ensure alignment with American geopolitical interests. The administration's actions included significant downsizing of USAID, with reports indicating that over 80% of its grants were terminated. This move was justified by the administration's desire to eliminate what it perceived as government inefficiencies and to redirect resources toward domestic priorities. The dismantling of USAID was met with swift legal challenges. A federal judge ruled that the actions taken by DOGE under Musk's leadership likely violated the Constitution. The court issued an indefinite injunction blocking further efforts to dismantle the agency, highlighting concerns over potential executive overreach and the circumvention of established legislative processes. Despite this ruling, the administration continued to make strategic appointments within USAID, placing individuals affiliated with DOGE in senior positions, further signaling its intent to overhaul the agency. Amid these developments, discussions about reforming USAID have gained momentum. Proposals have been put forward to merge USAID with the State Department, aiming to create a more streamlined approach to foreign assistance. This restructuring would involve integrating humanitarian assistance, disaster response, global health, and food security programs into a new limited mandate body within the State Department. Politically oriented programs would also be transferred to the State Department, reflecting a shift toward a more centralized management of foreign aid. Elon Musk has been a vocal advocate for more radical changes, suggesting that USAID should be shut down entirely due to alleged inefficiencies and mismanagement. He argues that private organizations and non-governmental organizations, NGOs, could potentially deliver aid more effectively, leveraging innovation and market-driven solutions to address global challenges. This perspective aligns with a broader push for public-private partnerships in international development, emphasizing the role of the private sector in driving sustainable change. The suspension of USAID's operations has had immediate and profound impacts on global humanitarian efforts. Critical programs, such as those addressing HIV/AIDS, malaria, and disaster relief, have been disrupted, affecting millions of vulnerable individuals worldwide. The sudden halt in funding has left many projects in limbo, with NGOs and local partners scrambling to fill the gaps. This situation has raised ethical concerns about the United States' commitment to global health and development, as well as the potential long-term consequences of withdrawing support from fragile regions. In response to these challenges, there have been calls for increased transparency and accountability in how foreign aid is administered. Advocates argue that embracing modern technologies, such as blockchain, could enhance the tracking and management of aid funds, reducing the risk of corruption and ensuring that resources reach their intended beneficiaries. Blockchain technology offers the potential for real-time tracking of transactions, creating an immutable record that could enhance trust and efficiency in aid distribution. The debate over the future of USAID also reflects broader discussions about the role of the United States on the global stage. Critics of the dismantling argue that foreign aid is a vital tool of soft power, promoting stability, fostering goodwill, and advancing national security interests by addressing the root causes of conflict and extremism. They contend that retreating from international development commitments could create vacuums that adversarial powers might exploit, thereby diminishing U.S. influence globally. Conversely, proponents of restructuring or even eliminating USAID assert that foreign aid should be more strategically targeted, focusing on outcomes that directly benefit U.S. interests. They argue that a leaner, more efficient approach could yield better results, both for recipient countries and for American taxpayers. This perspective emphasizes the need for reform to address bureaucratic inefficiencies and to ensure that aid programs are both effective and aligned with national priorities. As the 90-day suspension period draws to a close, uncertainty looms over the fate of USAID. The administration's actions have sparked intense debates in Congress, among international partners, and within the development community. Lawmakers are grappling with questions about the appropriate balance between domestic priorities and international responsibilities, the effectiveness of current aid programs, and the potential risks of ceding global leadership in development assistance. The outcome of this debate will have far-reaching implications, not only for the future of USAID, but also for the millions of people worldwide who rely on U.S. assistance. It will also signal to the international community the direction of U.S. foreign policy and its commitment to addressing global challenges. Whether through reform, restructuring, or a complete overhaul, the decisions made in the coming months will shape the landscape of international development and the United States' role within it for years to come.